I will just wrap up very briefly to say that I was excited to hear about the various TNC companies entering our marketplace, and I still am. I think that technology is an amazing thing. I am the last person to ever want to stifle the advances in our technology and new entrepreneurs from starting businesses and having great ideas to move us forward. And I will stand by that. And we've had some legislation in this chamber over the last several years that does the exact opposite. We have tried to protect certain industries in some cases, and that's a noteworthy endeavor also. Here we are faced with this situation where we are kind of trying to do both at the same time, and that is a very, very difficult thing to do. The taxi industry is a long-standing industry in our state. They have performed a valuable service over time. We have the TNC companies, which is a new invention that does a very similar, and I would go back to saying maybe the same thing, but in a different way. And as a result, it's very difficult for us to come up with a mechanism that is fair to that industry and also fair to a new industry coming into our state. The thing that I would say is the greatest inhibitor of doing that successfully is trying to do too much. You know, we have other bills that we're going to be faced with. We have bills about the electric car industry versus the existing automobile dealer situation. It's a similar case where we have a regulatory environment that someone does not want to comply with because they claim, and maybe rightfully so, that their industry is different. This is the same thing. And the one thing I can point to is that because we have created such a deep and intertwined regulatory system for this, it becomes very difficult to untangle it for folks. And I would urge that we try and do the very least possible in regulating these types of industries to allow for new ideas and innovation and to prohibit us from making mistakes that might be damaging to one industry or another. I have some concerns about this bill. You can't have listened to the last, bit of conversation without realizing that there are certain things which may or may not, based on your opinion, concern you. We talked about the very, very high cost of a license to get engaged in this business, $50,000, potentially non-refundable. To me, that's a barrier to entry. We wouldn't say that to someone who wanted to become an insurance agent or a real estate agent or a plumber, electrician, anything. I don't know an industry where we charge such a high amount for a license to begin operating in our state. I see this as a mechanism only to prevent other small companies from getting involved, and I have a big problem with it. We learned that there are some potential concerns about the photo and decal requirements because there's no mechanism really to ensure that these things are happening. Certainly the TNC company wants to see them too. I have no doubt that they will try and self-police the drivers that they contract with, but at the same time, our primary focus has to be the protection of citizens and consumers in our state. And I'm afraid that part leaves some holes where that may not be happening. There is this restriction on cash payments, which I don't know is even lawful. There are the differences in this bill from how we are going to treat the TNC industry from the taxi industry that are very noteworthy. We are telling one what the prices are that they have to charge, while we are giving the other one full reign, except for in certain very specific situations. We are treating them the same in theory, but not the same in other things, though, like the requirement that they would have to travel to any destination. I have already expressed during the conversation that I think that the language in the bill will not end up ensuring that TNC drivers will in fact do what is prescribed in this language because there's no mechanism to make them do it. And that may in fact be a good thing because I don't know that every TNC driver who may just be a very young college-age kid. We didn't get into this, but I don't even know what the requirement is other than having a driver's license. You may be 16, 17 years old and be able to be a TNC driver. to send that person into a potentially dangerous environment, I don't think is a good idea, versus a professional who is gone through a different licensing process, a more extensive background check, and has, I would hope, have had some training to do so. We talked about the different requirement in the driver's licenses. We talked about the difference in the background checks, which I think is noteworthy. We talked about the, again, self-policing requirement for the TNCs. I'm just breezing through the bill just to make sure that we kind of remind ourselves before we vote of the things that are important. I guess that more or less covers the concerns that I have brought out in the question and answer, and I hope that people understand that the purpose of this was not as a means to say anything negative about the bill. I merely want people to understand the facts before we vote on it, because it's important what we are doing. And I want to make sure that we are very thoughtful before we potentially put any lives in danger with policy that we make. And I would urge my colleagues to give great thought to all of these concerns before they make their vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.